Welcome, friends, to Breakfast in the Ruins, a Michael Moorcock-flavoured podcast. This bonus show, a break from our normal programming, is a public information broadcast. Something is creeping in the long grasses and hedgerows of sleepy Sussex. It crawls, it swarms, it ravages. It will consume your flesh as if you are nothing but waste. Beware, beware, beware. The Woodlice. Oh, well, we're back in Derry and Tom's for a very, very special report. A warning to the wider public of menacing things coming from the woods. It's Graham. Graham's back. Welcome back, Graham.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going very well. And Phil's back too. Welcome back, Phil.
Hi, nice to be back.
Yeah, so last time we were in Derry and Tom's, Graham, what we were talking about last time, was it Pisces rising?
I think it might be Pisces. No, Sabbath.
Sabbath. Yeah, we did Sabbath, didn't we?
Yeah.
What an experience that was. Phil bailed out halfway through that episode.
I didn't bail out.
You did. We decided to come back and look at the second Sabbath novel, and you were like, nah, count me out.
Yeah, well, the first one was horrendous.
Yeah, well, I think we got quite a lot more out the second one, didn't we, Graham?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely keen for the third, actually.
Yeah, well, I've got 3 and 4 just sitting next to me right here. At some point, we've got to do it. But we've got other things to get at as well. Now, we'll talk about what we're going to talk about today in a moment. But you've been reading more Peter Cave. You read was it Firebug?
It was Fire Flood.
Fire Flood, and you read Crime Commandos, which I still haven't got round to.
Yeah.
And you said they were mildly disappointing.
Yeah. Yes. I was a bit disappointed. Fire Flood, it could have been half the length. Nothing really happened at all.
Yeah.
Until the very end. And then that didn't really... It wasn't as exciting as it should be, I don't think.
Yeah.
And Crime Commandos...
Fails to live up to the premise.
Yeah. I was a bit disappointed by it.
Yeah. I mean, really, when you got 4 corrupt cops and a mad bomb dog forming a gang to take down crime, and it doesn't live up to the premise, that's a bit disappointing, isn't it?
Yeah. I was I'm going to give, what was the other one? Truck drivers or something? Truckers, is it?
Truckers, yeah. Well, we've also got I think when I got that big box of Guy and Smith books, I got his trucker novel.
Oh, you got there, didn't you?
I think it's in there, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so many things. And of course, at some point, I think it'd have to be a special occasion. Should we hold our noses and do bamboo gorillas?
I think we do need to do that. I'm worried. I'm scared.
So am I. Yeah, so am I. It sounds like it could be a really fucking rough ride. So, Phil, for your benefit, Bamboo Gorillas is World War II villainous Japanese soldiers. Sounds deeply, deeply rough.
Yes.
Maybe we'll read 20 pages and then go, no, no, we're not doing it. We're not doing it. But I think at some point, even if it's just a pure one-on-one book club, me and you, and we don't actually do a podcast about it, I think we owe it to ourselves. We owe it to ourselves because it's probably the most valuable and expensive Guy and Smith book that we actually own. I think we've got to go there, haven't we?
We've got to go there, and you very generously gifted it to me, so we should do it.
Well, I think yours is the one that's got the. Which one have you got? Have you got the one with the Japanese soldier with a Sterling submachine gun on the cover, or a Sten gun, or is that the one I've got? Or have you got the one with the samurai sword?
Oh, I can't remember.
No, I can't. I can see them both in my mind's eye, but I can't remember who's got which one. But we've both got slightly different covers, haven't we? Yeah. Anyway, the upshot is the last time we were in Derry and Tom's, we touched upon your debut novel, which wasn't quite out yet, but now it is out. The Woodlice. It's out there. How does it feel to have your first book out there and being bought by people?
It's quite a weird feeling, actually. Obviously, I'm self-publishing, so is that cheating? I don't know, but it's
no.
It's an easy way of doing it. But it took me it took me about a year to actually finish it. So I started off and I wrote the first half really quickly, and then I stopped, and then I didn't necessarily have writer's block because I had loads of ideas, but I just couldn't be bothered to carry on. Like it's that classic thing. A lot of projects I do, if it takes a long time, I kind of do a lot very quickly, and then I kind of give up. But I think it was after Phil sent me those awful books. I forget the name of the author.
Yeah,
what was it?
Anthony Craig.
Yeah,
they're the ones.
I started reading those and thought, actually, I could probably get away with with finishing this book and writing something that's half decent. So
can I say congratulations? And they're definitely better than his books.
Well, it's quite a low bar, but
no, I said definitely.
It's a low bar that you sailed clear of.
Yes.
I mean, so the other thing is, I mean, it must feel good to have your first book out there, but how do you rate the feedback you've been getting? Because not only have people been buying your book, but you've been getting some lovely feedback from people like Lord Samper, and you've made it onto a list of killer critter novels, which is an alphabetical list of beasties in killer critter novels, and there you are under W, Woodlice. How does that feel?
I was pleased that there wasn't any other Woodlice stories. That was that would have been, even if I'd done it and then realised there's a whole genre that I'd missed of Woodlice killer critter books. But yeah, no, I had I've got my first rating on Goodreads, which is a 4 out of 5, which is nice to see.
Fantastic, well done.
But yeah, having a review that was really nice to see, actually, and especially it was lovely to see. But I've had really good feedback, actually. Even my wife enjoyed it, which is nice.
Good. Well, my wife enjoyed it too, so that's 2 wives. Yeah. So thinking back to over a year ago when you said that you kind of got off on a fairly productive start, what inspired it in the first place?
Inspiration partly to do with this podcast. So we're doing all the episodes around Guy and Smith and other other folks like the Rats and Herbert and all that, and Hudson. And I've always been into writing. I've got dyslexia, so I struggle sometimes with writing. I struggle with coming up with the right words, but I've always enjoyed the process, and I've got quite a good imagination. And I used to tell these bedtime stories to my kids about Woogie the Woodlouse, and I kind of thought about these sort of critter novels, and I just thought, what's the most innocent thing that could go horribly wrong? And I thought Woodlice, they do nothing. They don't hurt you. They wood mulch. They don't, there's nothing horrible about Woodlice. And I thought I'd give it a go. And after reading Guy and Smith's How to Write Horror Fiction, which is a really good introduction, I thought I'd use that as my guide. Yeah. And that's what I did.
Yeah, because writing horror fiction, it has quite a lot of process stuff in it, as well as little bits and pieces of inspirational thinking from Guy and Smith. So in terms of that process then, so what did you take away? What were your main takeaways from Guy and Smith's writing horror fiction in terms of the process? Because I mean, we talked to Michael Moorcock and he says, 15,000 words a day, 3 days, bang, 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 start at 9, finish at 5. It's like, yes, that's easy for you to say, Mike, But what was your process? What were your main takeaways?
I think one of the things that he said that I think a lot of other authors have said is write about things you know. So that's why, I've written very extensively about Sussex, and there's elements in there that are very Sussex centric, including the pub name, the main character, one of the main characters named Jack Fuller, the pub, The Four Men, which is a novel by Hilaire Belloc. I also based it around the village I currently live in. So that was one of the main things. And even though there's a bit in How to Write Horror Fiction where Guy and Smith sort of recommends leaving things to people's imagination, which he doesn't do in his own fiction.
Yeah. There are a few bits because I've got it. And when you mentioned it, I thought I'm going to give it a read. And like any guy in Smith book, it's a quick, breezy read. But there were a few moments where I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I'm not having this guy. I'm not having this at all.
Yeah, and a lot of it's a bit of research. I think that was it really. But I kind of liked his attitude in that book. He kind of sort of indicates that anyone can really do it. You just got to get on and do it.
Yeah.
But if you're not a professional writer, then you've got other things in your life, haven't you? If you're not doing that for all the time, then you've got other things, and that kind of knocks you off course. But I tended to do it in between meetings, to be honest. I've got those sort of 15-minute gaps where you can't do anything else, and I'll just have the document open and just sort of do a bit more.
Do you know, that's quite inspiring, because my relaxation method between meetings or between bursts of activity where I'm just like, I just need to zone out and get away from thinking about work is I drive trucks around in SnowRunner in a game called SnowRunner, which is completely unproductive and stupid. I need to take a leaf out of your book and actually start getting more productive with these things. There was one bit in writing horror fiction, but I think I sent you a screen grab of it, and it was the bit where he talks about violence in horror books. And he says, if it's an army of giant crabs, the violence is quite acceptable because it's fantasy. But if I was writing about an army of psychopaths, it would be distasteful. I read that. I was like, fuck off, guy. If you wrote a book about an army of psychopaths, it would be 10 times worse. Yeah. It would, because it would have all of the violence plus probably really problematic other stuff.
Well, bamboo gorillas, we imagine that's.
Yeah, we're gonna have to test it now, aren't we?
Yeah,
we're gonna have to test this out. Well, there's a few things that I tagged in, as well as the bullshit story about whether violence is acceptable or not if it's psychopaths versus killer crabs. But there's a paragraph here. It says the 1950s saw a new trend in paperback publishing. Publishers sprang up virtually overnight. Some lasted a few years, others disappeared after half a dozen titles. The imprint, which published over 100 horror titles, was Badger. Most of their novels were written by one man, Lionel Fanthorpe, under about 20 pseudonyms as well as his own name. These books had a variety of occult themes, were crammed with action, and the characters were believable. They were exceptionally good novels, and I read them avidly. Many years later, I met Fanthorpe, and a friendship developed which still exists today. As well as the Badger Supernatural series, Fanthorpe also wrote many of the Badger science fiction series. At one point, he was producing a 40,000-word novel every week. Like, holy shit. I know, right? That's crazy, isn't it? A 40,000-page word novel a week. But I've never heard of Lionel Fanthorpe. No. So I think we also have another mission outside of Bamboo Gorillas. We need to find a couple of Lionel Fanthorpe novels because Guy name tags him in this book and talks him up as a thriller writer, a supernatural writer, and a sci-fi writer who wrote hundreds of novels for Badger. I've got to say that. Have you ever seen a Badger novel in a shop?
Never heard of it. Never heard of it.
Me neither.
Nope.
Maybe they've all turned to pulp and fallen to bits.
Yeah.
But the next time we go to Morecambe, Phil, we've got a mission. We need to go to the old Pier bookshop and scan those shelves and try and find a Badger sci-fi book, because it probably will have been written by Lionel Fanthorpe. So yeah, we need to do a bit of homework on Lionel Fanthorpe and find out what the hell's going on. And also, Graham, you and I need to read a book and then podcast about it rather than going, this book looks interesting. Oh, it's a bit rubbish.
Yeah, that's true. A good name as well, isn't it? Lionel Fanthorpe?
Lionel Fanthorpe. It's a cracking
great name.
It sounds like someone out of Are You Being Served, but it is a great name. There's and of course, I also sent you a copy. Did I send you a copy of Tracer?
Yes, I read Tracer. Yeah, enjoyed Tracer.
I got halfway through it and then forgot to pick it up again.
Yeah,
I'd quite like to do an episode on Tracer at some point.
Yeah,
because
I really liked it.
That was pretty decent. I mean, we'll talk about it another time. It does kind of get bogged down a little bit in sort of exposition. The middle section of the book really, really gets bogged down into this is happening and this is why it's happening, and everything kind of grinds to a bit of a slow pace. But I like it. I like it as a book. And when I was rereading it, I was quite happy that I kind of thought it might be a bit problematic reading it 30 years later and have dodgy bits considering the subject matter. But actually, it was surprisingly free of dodginess.
Yeah, no, that's what initially when I saw the cover, read the back, I thought, well, this could go horribly wrong.
Yeah,
because I hadn't heard of it before. But it was really quite sympathetic, wasn't it? It was quite positive.
Yeah.
I won't go into too much detail on it, but
yeah, for listeners, just like a mini trail. So it was written by a guy called Stuart Jackson. As far as I'm aware, it's the only novel he ever wrote. Written in the early 90s, late 80s or early 90s. I think I've read it in the early 90s. Used it as inspiration for a game that I was running.
I think it was 1990. It was published.
1990, yeah, and it's an AIDS pandemic alarmist, like dystopian future novel in like a fascist Britain where AIDS has been used as a pretext to suppress just about every minority, but very, very specifically gay people. And the protagonist of the book is an investigator who works for the Special Health Authority, which is, I've no idea. Phil, is the Special Health Authority still a thing? Because it was the SHA who used to run places like Broadmoor and Rampton. I think the SHA probably isn't a thing anymore. I think it probably never survived. Yeah, no. maybe didn't survive Lansley's health service reforms around about 2010, 2011. But yeah, the Special Health Authority was a real part of the NHS or a real part of the Department of Health or whatever it was. And but in this universe or in this version of the dystopian future Britain of the 1990s, the Special Health Authority runs the camps that AIDS victims are locked up in. And he works for the Special Health Authority as a tracer who, in many ways, it's interesting reading it now because it's about tracing people who've been in contact with carriers. And when you think about the beginning of the COVID pandemic, people were employed to work phone lines as COVID tracers, weren't they? So it's, in fact, one of my mates, he actually got a job as a tracer and did the training, and then for 7 weeks got paid and didn't get a single day's work out of it. It's just crazy. But anyway, these tracers are more like Macintosh wearing detectives tracking people down so the heavy mob can go and put them away in detention camps. But there's a political mystery intrigue at the heart of it all that ends up having him on the run, effectively. It's actually quite a good thriller. Yeah. But it's got those lovely, future Britain is a fascist state tones. But yeah, the cover it's a Union Jack with a fist that's been incorporated into the design of the Union Jack with something like a police van and a police heavy and a guy in a Mac in front of it. So you look at that cover and think, yeah, this could go either way. But in actual fact, it's still a pretty good novel, and I think it's quite resonant reading it today after a global pandemic. So pretty decent.
Can I just say, whilst you were talking, I was listening.
Yeah.
But I just looked up Lionel Fanthorpe.
Oh yeah.
He's a retired British priest and entertainer, as well as writing millions of books.
Really?
Oh.
Yeah.
Do you know? Now you say that. Is
there's
that
loads of
name
books,
suddenly starting to ring more bells? Was Lionel Fanthorpe on TV when we were kids or something?
I haven't gone into his bio, but
no. Well, something to explore in the future. Yeah. So anyway, there's this another good section in writing horror fiction on imagination. I really like this part as well. It says, your imagination is a valuable asset. Don't be afraid to let it run riot. I still have one of my school reports dating back to when I was about 10 years of age. In the comments column, my English teacher had written, writes good English, but lacks imagination. I did not actually lack imagination, but I was too inhibited to put it down on paper. I guess I saved it all up until I left school. It was my mother who encouraged me and nurtured my boyhood imagination. She was a pre-war historical novelist and undoubtedly understood when others scoffed. Between the ages of 10 and 14, I was fascinated by the weekly comics and boys' story papers which were on sale. There was a wealth of well-written stories in the latter as opposed to comic strips in the former, tales of piracy, adventure, westerns, detective, and even horror. I well recall the story of a giant mole that existed deep in a maze of tunnels in a coal mine. Oh, that sounds awesome.
That sounds brilliant.
Yeah, such was my fascination that I did gardening chores for neighbours to earn money to buy around a dozen papers a week, as well as paying for my twice-weekly cinema visits. My father and my headmaster poured scorn upon the rubbish I was reading. I was forbidden to take any of these publications to school. My mother thought otherwise, but didn't dare say so. She suggested that I produce a weekly comic of my own, and she would buy it off me for 6p. Old money, of course. I did just that. I wrote and illustrated a comic every week. It ran to 52 issues without a break, and she gave them all back to me years later. Oh,
Oh,
that is such a
amazing.
lovely story, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. She
Fabulous.
sounds ace.
Yeah. It says, those boyhood ideas were all spawned from the comics and story papers I read, not plagiarised, I hasten to add. But the heroes of those days were stereotyped, and I didn't have much difficulty in creating my own similar characterisation. The plots were all my own, but there again, cowboys, pirates, highwaymen, and the like all had very similar adventures. I cannot stress too strongly the benefits from just sitting down and writing. Make your first effort a trial run. I wrote a few horror stories in my comics. I was learning with every one I wrote. My amateur apprenticeship served me well. I allowed my imagination to run riot in the full knowledge that nobody, apart from my mother, would read what I had written. It is well worth a try before you make your first serious attempt to submit your work to a publisher. Furthermore, those initial ideas may well develop later. You know, that is so nice, because Moorcock said it was his mother who was his greatest fan and inspiration as well. And how important is it for kids to have that kind of encouragement, you know, from a parental figure? It's lovely. It's really warming reading that. Yeah. Now, there's also a section in here which we do have to talk about, Graham. And we will move on from this, Phil, because I know you haven't read this. But there's a great bit in here where it says, I well remember buying my first Amstrad PCW 8512. Other writers were extolling the virtues of the word processor, so I decided to give it a try. That took as much courage as starting to write a first book. My children were brought up with computers at school, but for me it was an alien world. I plucked up the courage, walked into a computer shop, and told the assistant that if she would teach me the basics in a way I could understand, I would buy a machine. She was most helpful. Several hours later, I had the word processor back home, and I've never looked back since. 5 years on, I am told that my Amstrad is obsolete, but I still use it. Oh, Graham, why is this a resonant story for us?
Oh, I just today, whilst I was driving along, I was thinking about that computer and thinking how I regret not buying it when it was on sale on eBay for £150.
Yeah.
I don't know why I didn't buy it. I think, well, I do know, because I couldn't have smuggled it into the house and got away with it. I still look on eBay to see if it comes up again.
I do. So for everybody's benefit, about 3, maybe even 4 years ago, Graham sends me a link to an Amstrad PCW 8512 on eBay, and it's listed as Guy N. Smith's Amstrad PCW 8512, complete with all of his 5 1/4 inch floppy disks, the manuals, some of which have been annotated by him, and some other bits and pieces of paraphernalia related to Guy N. Smith and this PC. It was 150 quid. But the downside was it was listed as untested.
Yeah.
And, you know, so you could have bought it. It could have been a brick. Now, even if it booted up, I suspect those drives would have been dodgy, because I think a PCW 8512 had 2 floppy 5 1/4 inch floppy disk drives. Now, back in the 80s, after I was a ZX Spectrum kid, right? 48K Spectrum, like most of my mates. But one of my mates, Tom, who was a computer whiz. So when we're 12, Tom has a program in Sinclair Programs. Can't remember what the program was. It was probably a shit snake game or something. But he wrote a program and it went in Sinclair Programs. So it was like a mini fucking celebrity at school, because he actually had a program published. And he went on to do computer engineering or whatever the hell it was. And he works in Edinburgh now, and has done since he left university, and earns shitloads of money writing software for spy satellites or something fucking stupid like that. But his brother had an Atari 800 XL, and I didn't have access to things like Commodore 64s, but an Atari 800 XL to me was like fucking the future. It was unbelievable. It was an 8-bit computer with 64K of RAM. It had loads of colours. It had incredible sound, much like a Commodore 64. But it also had a slot above the keyboard that you could plug game cartridges into. But it had proprietary connections for its tape deck and its 5 1/4 inch disc drive. And I ended up getting that Atari 800 XL off his brother, because he upgraded to a 130 XE or something, I can't remember. His brother was a bit of a whiz anyway. He ended up working for Raven Software and worked on things like the Medal of Honor PC games 25 years ago. But I got this Atari 800 XL, and the floppy drive, you were lucky if it worked one time in 4. That's when the jack that connected it to the computer was working. The tape decks, when you loaded a game, you thought loading a game on Spectrum was a pain in the ass. On the Atari 800 XL, even with a tape deck and a brand new cassette that you just brought back from the shops, it would fail 3 times out of 4. And the actual jack, which was the size of a brick, was fucking hopeless. So the idea that even if this computer booted up, Guy and Smith's PC booted up, the idea that the discs would work, be intact, I think it would be a bit of a stretch. I think it would be a bit of a stretch. So I think we might have dodged a bullet there, mate.
I think possibly. It's good to think that way. That's
yeah.
But it makes you feel better. But I was thinking about it today. Just I think I was flicking through his Pipe Dreams, and it's got a picture of him sitting next to it.
I mean, anyway. Had you the space to stick it in, a room with all your books and your working computer as something nice.
Yeah. And how would you get it would just be a mission to get any of the files off that.
Yeah.
It would just be a nightmare. I think those word processors, I think they actually had the 3-inch floppy disk, which was barely any other machine had them. So it was even a weirder thing.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah. Yeah. It's funny, thinking about that Atari 800 XL, when I moved to Bradford, it all went in a skip. And it worked. The tape and disk drives with the ridiculous proprietary cables were shit, but it still worked. Little did I know, 15 years later, there'd be a pandemic and a massive explosion in the collectability of old 8-bit machines. I've seen Atari 800 XLs in working condition go for 250 quid on eBay, and I threw it in a fucking skip. Just terrible. But I did look on eBay to see, as you did, if it had been relisted, and I can't see that it ever has. But I did find a working PCW 8512 for sale in Scunthorpe, Sunny Scunny, for 500 quid.
500 quid?
500 quid for a working version. Optimistic even for Sunny Scunny, I reckon. 500 quid. But I looked up the capabilities of the 512. So it had a Z80 processor, running marginally faster than a ZX Spectrum. It had 512k of RAM, which was amazing for 1985. It was pretty hot shit. Green monochrome 10-inch monitor, proprietary. Very cool. And in 1985, it would have cost 399 quid plus VAT. So near enough 500 quid in 1985. Blimey.
Because it was pretty much just a word processor, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You didn't do much else with it.
No, it did include a dot matrix printer and a monitor. So, for 500 quid.
Yeah, because we had them at my high school, in the business studies part of the high school.
Yeah.
And I remember that's what we did all of our business studies stuff on. They're really dull machines.
Yeah. It's funny, I remember, I always hear people talking about how they got into computers because of the BBC micros that the school had. I don't remember my school having any fucking computers. I don't remember ever seeing a computer at school.
Yeah. Well, at high school and stuff. Or
junior school, high school, primary school, any of them.
Yeah. My primary school, we had one BBC that was sort of sat in the corridor that you're allowed to touch. So that was it.
I reckon it's probably the case that there was a science teacher who had his favourites, like half a dozen kids, and they all got to go in a room and use the BBC micro. Phil, did you ever get exposed to computers at school?
No, not at all.
Yeah, too busy chasing boys. That was your problem. Yeah. Or playing in the school orchestra, more like. Yeah.
Too old.
Yeah. Girly Swat playing in the school orchestra. Yeah. So the last thing I'm writing horror fiction, my other main takeaway is just how badly I need to read Crab's Fury, the comic he wrote and that was illustrated by Charlie Adlard. And there's a page of it reproduced in here, and it's great. It looks amazing, but that's like rocking horse shit as well.
Yeah, I need to get that somehow.
Yeah, it looks a little bit scarce. And also, that page suggests Pat Davenport might have got eaten by crabs.
No.
Seriously.
Big spoiler.
Well, I bet she wasn't. But there seems to be a suggestion that she might have been. Well, anyway, writing horror fiction, pretty good. I think next time we talk about Guy and Smith, we need to find an excuse to talk for 10 or 15 minutes about moles and their control. But that's one for the future.
Yes, so it is an amazing book, actually.
I just love the texture of the cover.
Yeah, it's a lovely thing.
But
yeah,
it's beautiful.
Let's not go into that.
So let's talk about the Woodlice. What were the key things you felt were essential, and how did you decide to implement them? Because what are your key components for a successful killer critter horror novel?
Components, I think, something that was a bit ridiculous. I think that's important. Hence the Woodlice. The vignettes.
Yes.
I think that they're very important.
Yeah.
Some dodgy sex scenes. I think that's important.
Yeah. Thigh references.
Lots of thigh references.
I did laugh at the thigh references. I felt like the target audience.
Yeah. I think it was quite a niche joke, but I thought it was essential to put in. I think we went on about it, didn't we, with James Herbert?
Yeah, we did.
I think that's it, really, isn't it? Vignettes. Yeah. Dodgy sex.
So when I was thinking about this, I thought, right, yeah, okay. I mean, you've got to have the interesting protagonist. I think your protagonist is an interesting protagonist that breaks the mold slightly. Talk about that in a second. You've got to have your antagonists. Obviously, you've got your Woodlice. I've got vignettes. I've got relatability. There's something that you do with your characters and vignettes that made them relatable and enjoyable for me. You know, so you've got thighs. You've got references to microdots, which I laughed out loud at because I haven't even heard that reference for about 30 years. You know, you've got to have your false ending where everything's sorted. Oh no, it's not sorted. Loads of people die, and you've got to have a sequel tease, haven't you? So yeah, you've got all those things. You've ticked all those boxes. Phil, tell us about the Woodlice.
In the book, the whole.
No, just Woodlice in general. You know, the ecosystem of yards and bricks. No, of course, yeah. Ha 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 ha. Yeah, let's talk about the Woodlice, the book. So we've got quite an interesting protagonist, haven't we? It's because the protagonist isn't a misogynistic male, which breaks the mold.
Now, would you say there's one? I would say there's two, because you've got Jack Fuller and Sarah Brabble.
True. Bone to pick with Graham on Jack. Close your ears, people, if you don't want spoilers. But I fucking love Jack. I love Jack.
Yeah, so did I.
I wanted more Jack, and I wanted more of the dynamic between our two central characters, and I was denied it for reasons that I'm still struggling to get over.
Because they could have gone on and done more novels together.
They could.
Yeah, it was I think that might have been the reason why it took me a while to get back to actually. I don't want to spoil it because I'd like people to read it and stuff, but. I had that idea in my head, and I was thinking, should I do that or should I not? Because initially Jack was meant to be the main character.
Yeah.
But then I thought, actually, let's have Dr. Sarah to sort of take more of a central role, because it seemed, I don't know, I got into her mind a bit more whilst I was writing, so it seemed right for her to sort of take more of a central role.
Yeah. I really like that dynamic between them.
To do it as briefly as possible, we've got this little village, Bramblehurst.
Yeah.
And in the setting, you get to meet a couple of the locals, like Jack, who's the gamekeeper who used to be a poacher. And he meets Dr. Sarah in a pub, and then from there we find out about Gentech, who are very close by and wanted to take over more of the local landscape. And then something obviously goes wrong there, and Jack finds something that's quite terrible, and Sarah overhears it and then starts the investigating between the two of them of the Woodlice and what's gone on. That's it. I don't want to give too much away.
No. But you know what? I've marked a couple of things out that I think I want to read, because you know what? There are things you got to do in this kind of book when you're doing vignettes, and this is one of the vignettes I found extraordinarily relatable. And I sense this is writing from experience, Graham, because it says you write about what you know. It says in writing horror fiction. So anyway. Planky has given his girlfriend a microdot, and he says you should feel something in 30 minutes or thereabouts, so it's just a case of waiting. Fancy a spliff in the meantime? As he was saying this, he took out a lump of hash from his tin and fished around in a pocket for his tobacco pouch. He crossed his legs and used a crease in his trousers to lay out the Rizzlers. He ripped a bit of cardboard from the Rizzler packet, rolling it up and placed it in the end of the papers. Next came the tobacco, which he had laid out along the length of the paper. He took the hash between 2 fingers, gently heated it with his lighter and began to crumble it on top of the tobacco. With this complete, he rolled the paper with its contents between his thumbs and fingers, fashioning a spliff. He presented it to Clarissa. She lit the end and inhaled deeply. He watched her closely as she held her breath momentarily before breathing out a cloud of smoke. She took a few more tokes and passed it back to Planky. She stretched and settled herself into a comfortable position. Laying down, she placed her head on his lap. He could see she was starting to relax. He toked on the spliff and closed his eyes, allowing himself to focus on the music as it built up into a crescendo of soaring guitar and synthesizer whooshes. Planky had a metallic taste in his mouth, a sure sign the acid was taking effect. Some fucking memories coming rushing back, reading that. He knew the signs. It wouldn't be long. His hand rested on Clarissa's head and he stroked her hair. He could feel the build-up. You okay? She didn't say anything, but he felt a nod ahead. He looked up the trees. They took on a vivid shade of green, standing out from the surrounding blackness, their limbs twisted together, swaying in the wind. And this is where we go full-on 70s horror action. He started to feel himself get aroused as the visuals came on. The limbs became fleshy, more sensual. He saw writhing forms, naked flesh, hands wrung over gnarly breasts, moving down torsos across triangular patches of mossy hair towards the thighs. His vision exploded into fractal images, thigh fractal images. So many thighs! Seeing this carnal orgy in the woodland around him, his hands started to move over Clarissa's body and he felt a squirm and wriggle. He couldn't believe the scene unfolding around him. The woods had come alive in an obscene display of nakedness. So much going on there. Number 1 is tripping balls. Number 2 is seeing thighs and mossy triangles in the trees. That's fucking brilliant. Mossy triangle.
Yeah.
So
well,
great.
That part actually did happen up in Chanctonbury Ring. I had very hallucinations, and then it was quite bizarre. And then Dylan the rabbit appeared in the trees from the magic roundabouts.
Yeah. So the reference to microdots I found amazing because in my experience, microdots were exceptionally rare. I don't know about you, but microdots were things that were talked about in hallowed tones, whereas most commonly we got strobes, spacemen, occasionally super strobes, and a variety of the blotting paper types. I never came across microdots until I went to Reading Festival, around about 1993, I think. And so on the Friday night, we took 2 microdots. And on the Saturday, because, you know, the common handed down knowledge was whatever you take one day, if you want to do it again the next day, double up. So two microdots on Friday, 4 strobes on Saturday. And then I had the world's most colossal panic attack in the mosh pit while Rage Against the Machine were on.
Oh.
And I can still remember to this day fighting my way out of it and lamping people if they didn't get out of my way. I kind of turned into a raging monster trying to get out of the mosh pit because I was just having one colossal panic attack. That's my only ever experience with microdots.
That doesn't sound good or fun.
No, it wasn't good. And I think that was the end of my dalliances with psychedelics. Gods above.
I like that you called it white lightning.
Well, they were very they were very popular around these parts back then.
Oh, is that what the word called?
Yeah, because there was blotters called white lightnings. They just had like a little lightning strike on them.
Not cider then.
Well, yeah, that's that was also very popular around these parts.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, you want people to read this book, so we're not going to spoil it like it's a 1970s book that, you know, people have read or can find in various different places. But there are some excellent Woodlice death scenes. Phil, you've actually got a question about one of these vignettes, haven't you, that you mentioned to me earlier on?
Yes. So I've read the book a couple of times and I really did enjoy it. But the first time, I'm like, how does this fit in? I knew it was coming the second time, so it wasn't. And but the dogging one. With these random people towards the end. And it's like, what?
Yeah, it's in the countryside around here. There's various dogging spots, and they're renowned and known. So it kind of fitted the narrative that there would be a place near the village that was a dogging spot, but also kind of how my brain works. There's a song, there's a shanty or a sea song there's a part of it that's quoted in that scene, and because it talks about Dogger Bank, I had that in my head, and I just thought I kind of wanted to put a shanty in the book. How could I fit it into some narrative? And I just thought Dogger Bank sounds a bit like dogging, and it seemed to fit. And I wanted a scene that was a bit more sort of 70s horror film that you could imagine in a horror film, and that kind of fitted the scene, I felt.
I like the fact she got into it, that she wasn't against it. I also like the fact that one of the cars was just steamed up for all of it and he couldn't see anything.
It is one of the things about the country, isn't it? Because we moved to a village when I was 12, an East Yorkshire village, and there used to be a railway line from Hull to Hornsey, and it was all torn up during the beaching closures.
Yeah.
But there's still a little car park there, and people, when I was a kid, people would park up there and walk the dogs on the old railway line. But apparently now it's just a dogging spot. That car park is just a dogging spot. So, yeah. Yes, I said to my sister once, do you ever go for walks? Because me and my sister used to would go, walk down there, then walk to Hornsey along the railway line. I said, you done that recently? She said, no. She had a dog dog called Bex. She said, no, last time I took Bex down there, they were bloody dogging. I thought, oh, crikey. Yeah. I think you seem to have done some of your homework in some of this as well, because one of the other things you've got to have with these kind of things is you have to have a scientific solution to the problem. Because, of course, the problem of the woodlice is science gone awry, isn't it? It's bio experiments gone wrong. But there was all this stuff, the solution, and when they're talking about diatomaceous earth, it's a natural substance, essentially a crushed fossilized algae. It's harmless to humans and animals, but deadly to insects. The particles are sharp enough to penetrate the exoskeleton of woodlice and similar creatures. It doesn't rely on chemicals, which these woodlice seem to be immune to, works by dehydrating them from the inside out. And knowing you and your love of the countryside and all these things, I thought that there's no way that's made up. That's got to be real.
Yeah. That's you can go and buy it in garden centres and stuff to use as a thing to kill all sorts of stuff. Really, they use it quite a lot for bed bugs as well, I think, and things like that. Because it's not toxic, so it doesn't really affect anything else apart from insects with an exoskeleton. So I was trying to think of, I wanted a way of trying to be harmonious but tackle the woodlice. But as you know, that doesn't quite pan out. But
it started really good, and you think it's all going to end nicely, but of course, the army come in, it all goes to rack and ruin.
Which is always one of my favourite moments in any of these kind of things. There are things I love in movies and books, and I don't know why. Maybe it's part of liking war movies when I was a kid, or liking the unit episodes of Doctor Who in the 70s with John Pertwee. I always love it when you get movies or books where the army turn up and soldiers end up running around going, aye, and getting eaten by terrible things. Not so long ago, we watched The Swarm, the 1970s Erwin Allen disaster movie with Michael Caine, and it's mostly awful. It's really fucking boring. Killer bees, hugely boring. Yeah. But the bits with soldiers with flamethrowers trying to fight killer bees is just fucking great. I love it. Can't get enough of it. And all those films like The Crazies in the 70s where the army moved in like white protective suits with M16s and everything goes haywire. I fucking love all that stuff. So we get that, but we also get our false ending. It's worked. Or has it? Yeah. Always a winner.
A classic thing. But
yeah,
you also have to mention, Andy, your part in this book.
Well, I was, not only was I really happy to be asked to contribute a vignette, which I had a lot of fun with, I was also really, and not only was I delighted to, and very, very proud when these copies that you sent us dropped through the door and I saw that your book was actually in print and I could hold it. It was a wonderful thing, because we've been talking about these books for such a long time, and I know how much you love this genre and how much you enjoy it. And of course, a little spin-off of this, and I don't know if you've made any kind of announcement about this, is one of the things that you've been asked to contribute to, which is also wonderful. And you already you'd written for something for a newsletter already, hadn't you, or an introduction or something?
Yeah.
But that's really, really lovely. And yes, okay, there was also a bit of me that was like, when I was reading through, thinking, oh, I'm quite excited to get to the church. And yeah, I did get a lovely little kick out of reading that bit. So it was really, really lovely of you to ask, and I really enjoyed doing it. Yeah.
Well, it was.
Can I say? Sorry.
Go on,
I was just going to say, I know that you wrote it because you told me, but had I not, I would have said, did you have any part of it, using the word cunting in it?
No
spoilers, but yes, someone shouts, "Shut the cunting doors."
One word.
Yeah, but it was interesting because you wrote that way before I'd even got to that part of the book, and it kind of just slotted in perfectly. It was like this is the perfect bit to go in at that part of the book. It worked really well, I thought.
I thought it was great.
Yeah.
And the fact that we get to that point where it's like everything goes quiet, everything's is everything resolved? Well, our protagonist isn't quite sure. She's got a sense of unease about things. Then boom, mass death in a church. Yeah. Because all you said to me at the time was, I'm writing this book. Do you fancy, putting together a vignette for it? I said, yeah, I'd love to. So he said, well, it's got to be about the priest and set in a church, but do whatever you want. So it was like, ooh. Okay, let's go. I think originally I'd written something about a tramp.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Which I think I've still got kicking around somewhere. Maybe save that for another day.
Yeah.
But then he said, no, it's set in the 80s. Needs to be set in a church. I was like, all right, cool. Let's give it a whirl. Now the cool thing is, of course, we've got a sequel tease at the end as well. So is there going to be a sequel to the Woodlice?
I'm not sure yet. There might possibly. I don't know. I'll see how it goes. I'm currently just finishing up another book, which is entirely different, which is about set in the sort of set in 1993. It's about a teenager who was into hacking and stumbles across a conspiracy, and then gets basically like a sort of a cyberpunk, well, not really cyber, but yeah, sort of a cyber thriller set in 1993. So quite different to this, but yeah, I think I might do another Woodlice. I don't know if it would be the Woodlice, but maybe with Sarah Brapples.
Well, yeah. I mean, there are plenty other terrifying menaces to expose her to. There's all sorts of possibilities. Doesn't have to just be Woodlice. No, I remember a while back.
I have to say, all the way through reading it, I itched all the way through.
Yeah,
that's a good sign.
That's a good sign, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Phil, what did you think? Because obviously there's a female main character. Was it convincing enough?
Yes, I liked the character. I did, and I did like the growing relationship between her and Jack. So it was, not the ending I'd like, but I can see her going on. She's got the bit between her teeth, which is really nice, because she comes across as very unassuming, but she really will fight for nature and the environment. And I was like, yeah, I did like your protagonist a lot.
Right. Great. Thank you.
I think there is also room for a Jack Fuller prequel about when he was, I don't know, in Suez. about his experiences in Suez or something like that. Yeah, I think there's lots of potential. Lots of potential.
Yeah. That's a good thought.
When they looked at each other across the pub, and at first I wasn't sure about him, and he was like, "She's all right, I suppose."
Yeah, and he didn't pair her up either.
No, he didn't.
Did he? Yeah. Yeah, there's loads of possibilities for that character, I think, for new weird scenarios. I don't know if you remember, but a while back, Graham, we thought about a role playing game that could do these kind of things, didn't we?
We did,
And
yeah.
on the Discord, there's still a link to the spreadsheet Quincy versus Giant Scampy, which was like our our working title for a role playing game, which would be a combination of Guy and Smith style novels, but crossed with those American TV shows from the 70s and 80s that were just about a random professional of some description that gets involved in a problem of the week. So Quincy is a good example, and then they always have a quirk. So Quincy's quirk, I think, was he had two quirks. One, he lived on a boat. That's fine, isn't it? Like Petrocelli lived in a half-built house that he never got finished. So that's fine as well. And then you also have like the boon or sort of buddy type of thing. So, we put together these tables. And so for archetype, we had police surgeon, country doctor, inner city teacher, grizzled PI, forensic accountant, corporate lawyer, chauffeur stroke valet, lifeguard, hack journalist, insurance investigator, crime writer, municipal engineer, architect, inventor, scientist, priest, psychologist, professional skeptic, cameraman stroke photographer, or club stroke bar owner. I think we ran out at a D20 table. And then quirk, getting on a bit, or lives in a caravan stroke trailer, Lothario, one of them is obsessed with thighs. That's reasonable. Lives on a boat, massive warehouse apartment, because that's the type of thing, or roller skates, or lives in a windmill, or any of these things. Then you have boon stroke buddy. So I think the boon stroke buddy thing with Quincy would have been that he has a massive gang of police mates, but he solves all the crimes while they're playing poker. So you could create a character quite quickly for these, but then you need your scenario stroke mystery. So I don't know. I don't suppose we've got a D20 to hand, and I haven't either. But Phil, pick a number between 1 and 20.
17.
Okay, 17. So an old flame has asked for help. So let's say that it's an insurance investigator who wears roller skates and has a rich benefactor who's a prick. I also had reincarnated as a dog as one of the complications as well. A bit of James Abbott there. So an old flame asks for help. Now, where's this taking place? Graham, number between 1 and 20.
13.
13 is in a sanatorium.
Oh.
So old flame, perhaps she writes you a letter and she's in a sanatorium and there's a problem. But meanwhile, Phil, pick a number between 1 and 20.
3.
3. That's giant rats. That's a bit passé, isn't it? So sanatorium overrun with giant rats. Try Graham, pick a number between 1 and 20 that isn't 3.
5.
5. Giant rabbits. Giant
7.
rabbits menacing a sanatorium. Yeah, this is where random generation tables start to fall down. And RN Jesus is failing again. Killer fish. Can't have killer fish in a sanatorium, can you? Okay, let's pick a number above 10.
11.
Military hardware gone wrong.
Oh, yes.
So that could work. So an old flame who's in a sanatorium writes a letter to the insurance investigator whose rich benefactor, who's a prick, is really reluctant to let him go and do it. So he's got to go AWOL to investigate, and there's military hardware gone wrong. So, I don't know. Maybe at some point in the future, if we're really lacking any kind of inspiration, we should base a novel on these shit D20 random generation tables.
I reckon that there would be a good novel.
Yeah, it would. Yeah. What else?
Just take out the roller skates because it just makes me think of Dick Van Dyke.
Oh yeah. Okay. No roller skates then. How about? Yeah, we'll go with lives in a windmill. Yeah, that's fine, isn't it? Lives in a windmill. But there's a few other things in there: Satanists, chuds, cannibalistic hillbillies, neo-Nazi death cult, murderous cult of children. Oh, we could turn these into D40 tables quite easy.
Yeah.
But I think your protagonist needs more airtime or more page time or whatever it is. And I think we need a Jack Fuller prequel about his horrific experiences in sewers, which, will be difficult to read for sensitive readers. Oh, So much potential out there. So
Yeah,
much potential.
Definitely
Well,
good ideas.
you know what, Graham?
Can
Where
I
can
ask
people?
a question
Of course you
before we
can.
go further? Is Chuggy Pigs? Is it Chuggy Piggy? Chuggy? Is that a real thing?
Yeah, that's a term for woodlice, chuggy pigs.
Never heard it before.
Yeah, I think it's a Sussex term. I think.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have them up
you called them
north.
you called them pills or something, didn't you?
Pillbugs.
Pills.
Yeah.
Pill bugs. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from. It must be a northern thing. Ravening pillbugs. Yeah. Ravening pillbug dangling from your cheek. Oh, good God. Yeah. What a terrifying image.
The horrors.
Yeah. And it also gave me an opportunity to stick a couple of real people in there as well, going back to that vignette. So the verger, Paul Hillary. Well, Paul, you might listen to this podcast and have absolutely no idea that you're in a book. You're in a book about woodlice. You're not a finance director at an NHS organisation. You're a verger in a church down south. And the Jehovah's Witness Derek Misen is also a real person, a mate of ours from back in the day who married and turned Jehovah's Witness in his mid-20s, which was amazing, really, when you consider what we used to get up to. That he went in that direction. It was a bit of a turn up for the books. No. Yeah. But if there's ever a sequel and we bring back Derek Misen because his death isn't described, then he needs to come back. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds good. There's legs in that, Derek.
There is. Yeah, and I think I said to you, he needs a cafe called Chez Des, because when we were kids, Des's one ambition was to have a cafe called Chez Des. It wasn't a cafe where he would run his killer woodlice death cult worship from, but it was a cafe that he would have called Chez Des had he not become a Jehovah's Witness and spend time driving copies of Watchtower around in his estate car instead, which is the last time anybody bumped into him saw. Bless you, Des. Bless you, Des. Well, that was the woodlice. So we look forward to hearing what's next. Now, where can people get the woodlice?
On Amazon. I feel a bit dirty using Amazon, but it was the easiest self-publishing at the time. But I think my next book I'm going to move to something else. But yeah, on Amazon you can search for GP Nedlow. That's my pen name. Not very imaginative. It's just my name backwards. But there you go.
Well, sorry, we will link to it in the show notes. And we also know it's available from Amazon.com as well, because one of our muckers has sent you a picture saying they picked it up in America as well.
Yes, yeah.
So there we go.
Fantastic.
Not only is it available, it's available worldwide.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
I have to recommend it. I would encourage people, especially if they enjoy Guy and Smith, because it kind of felt that sort of genre, that sort of feel about it. But I liked it more. I enjoyed your protagonists. I'm still gutted about Jack, but I did enjoy the two of them and Sarah continuously throughout.
Thank you.
They're well done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And one thing I mustn't forget, another inspiration for writing this was your idea of the one-shit book.
Oh, yeah.
Because I wanted to try and write a book that you could read in one shit.
This is, in many ways, the perfect one-shit book, because you could absolutely get through this in one visit to the throne.
Yeah, that was the aim.
Mission accomplished. Mission accomplished. Well, mate, thanks for coming to talk to us and tell us about the woodlice, about your inspirations, about your process. And we look forward to whatever comes next. And
Absolutely.
I like me a bit of cyberpunk, so I'm quite looking forward to that one as well. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, both.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Many thanks to Graham for coming along to talk about the woodlice. And despite sounding like she was broadcasting from a biscuit tin, thanks to Phil too for looking up Lionel Fanthorpe. About an hour after we finished recording, Graham messaged me to say he did have a badger book on his shelf after all. And then the penny dropped with us that Lionel Fanthorpe was in fact the leather-jacketed vicar that presented Fortean TV in the early 90s, something we both watched on late-night telly through heavy-lidded eyes.
I'm Father Lionel Fanthorpe, Welcome to the world of Fortean TV, a celebration of the miraculous, the mysterious, and the downright weird. This word Fortean comes from Charles Fort, who was a turn-of-the-century author and philosopher and a lifelong researcher into unexplained phenomena. Fort taught us that science doesn't always know all the answers, but that there is another world, a world of oddities and anomalies that science couldn't always explain. And this is the world of Fortean TV.
Lionel's still going at 92, and a couple of years ago he recorded an intro to the DVD release of Fortean TV. I'll link to that in the show notes because I'm sure there are others that listen to this podcast that have similarly bleary-eyed memories of that show. Graham's already badgering away at least 2 more books that I know of, and we'll keep you posted on progress. But for now, you can pick up the Woodlice via Amazon, and I'll drop links to those in the show notes too. Before I close, as ever, I'll just take time to thank our patrons. First, those without tier: Anthony Piconti, Tim Cardos, Dave Dempster, and Sebastian Weetabix. And our Chaos Engineers: Ed Von Stout, Andrew Cicluna, Andrew Spong, Andrew Van Ness, Anthony Porter, Benjamin Fletcher, Ben Hagar, Brandon Mays, Dan Charnley, Dave Griffiths, Dave Voxman, Gabriel Laycock, Harvey Faulkner-Aston, Jim Kirkland, Jim Jupp, John W. Lays, Jules Lawrence, Mal Pertwee, Matt Saltz, Michael Hopwood, Nick Hopkinson, Ofer Ziv, Paul McRandall, PJ Cooper, Scott Butler, and Simon Perrins. And of course, thanks to our crafty Jugaderos, Adrian Tchaikovsky, Brian Henderson, Chris Sharp, Christian Hundal, Graham Holden, Kevin Williams, Liam Turner, Loz, Mark Buckley, Mark Taylor, Matthew Broom, Murray Palmer, Sean Twist, Toby White, and Taylor Lavery. An eternal thanks to our patron demons: Action Edmonds, Alistair Davison, Andrew Clark, Andy Darby, David Lee, Derek Clunan, Fred Quiche, Gareth Wilson, Glenn Sawyer, Greg Faulkner, Gwen Barlow, Ian Stead, Janie Stim, Jason Vogel, Joachim Sund, Joe Monty, Johan Hiarper, Jonathan Sharp, Lee Gary, Marius Latauskas, Mark Hebden, Miles Reed-Labato, Neil Burton, Paul Hillary, Randall Gatlin, Steve Round, Tom Murphy, Tony Malazzo, the OG patron Norman Beresford, and last but never least, Robert McMillan. Enough of my blather. Don't forget you can follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky with the handle @BreakfastRuins. You can email us at breakfastruins@outlook.com. The webpage is breakfastintheruins.com. BITR Breakfast in the Ruins Radio is live on Radio Garden or via the web player at breakfastintheruinsradio.blogspot.com. We have our Patreon page too, of course, and there are a few extra odds and sods on there, including a second edition of the Weetabix Files. But until next time, take care, stay safe, and we will meet again soon on the Moonbeam Roads.